Bees had been living on this backyard fire pit for a few weeks before the family who lived here lifted the cover and discovered this beautiful hive. So I gave the bees some smoke and I got to work. This was a pretty small colony, but it looked very active, so I was excited to get into the heart of the hive. I started by only smoking the outermost piece of comb where I needed to work so that the bees would move off it and I wouldn't squish any while I grabbed the comb. I used my hive tool to gently break the comb away from the fire pit. I could tell by the bright yellow color of this comb that it was pretty fresh and it was going to be very soft, so I would need to be extra careful with it. And that's because comb gets darker as it ages and as the bees use it more and more over time. Hives usually have comb in a range of colors, and in removals like this one, where I'm starting on the outside of the hive and working my way in, you may actually notice the pieces of comb getting darker the deeper inside the hive I go. As I removed my first piece of comb, I was excited to see that it looked like it was full of everything the bees needed to survive and that this colony looked pretty healthy. These bees did not have very much honey stored, but that wasn't too unusual for a colony this size in this time of year. And now that the bees would be under my care, I could easily feed them and give them the resources they needed. So I grabbed a wooden frame, and I was lucky that the size of the naturally built comb fit almost perfectly into my frames. This meant that I wouldn't have to trim too much or any of the comb to fit into the frames. You can see how this piece still has a lot of bees on it, and they just let me work alongside them. These bees were very gentle, and they didn't have a lot of resources to defend or a reason to get very aggressive. So after I had this piece of comb where I thought it was best in the frame, I slid the rubber bands over it to secure it in place. The goal was that as I got more comb and more bees into my temporary travel hive, the bees would start recognizing that box as their new home instead of the fire pit. But I needed to get a lot more of the hive and colony, and hopefully the queen in there before that would happen. So I grabbed my smoker and I started to work my way farther into the hive. I did the same thing with the second piece of comb that I did with the first. I gave the bee some smoke at the top of the comb and only in the place where I needed to grab. After I felt like enough bees had left the area, I used my hive tool to detach